This is certainly one of the most horrific cases that I've dealt with.
As a father, an investigator,
Opening my contacts book for the first time to reveal the secrets of what it really takes to be a murder detective.
There was a huge amount of media interest.
On the front line, exposing how we solve the most heinous of crimes.
That scene will sit with me for the rest of my life.
Welcome to Secrets of a Murder Detective.
The murders of Cyan Blake and her young sons Zachary and Amon in December of 2015 was one of South East London's most horrific cases. I'm meeting one of the senior officers on the case to discuss what really happened, the pressures, the setbacks, and the eventual methods that brought the killer to justice.
Richard Leonard, former Detective Chief Inspector of Metropolitan Police, dealt with many investigations, but never have I ever dealt with an investigation where a mother and her two sons have been killed. And I think it's something you never forget.
This is also a deeply personal story to me, as I was part of the murder team that worked on the case.
Richard, good to see you. Thanks for coming in. Richard, the case we're going to talk about today is one that we both worked on back in late 2015, early 2016. As a murder investigation team, you don't just deal with murders, you often get given high-risk missing persons to look at and help the local police officers. And a report came in about a missing person. It was a lady by the name of Cyan Blake.
Yeah.
What's your memory of that?
Emergency which service?
Cases that normally the case with things like this, we were actually on call team. She'd been missing for a couple of weeks by that point, with her two sons. My understanding was that the borough commander for Bexley had seen a news item where it had been highlighted that Cyan was missing with her two sons. And they made contact with the specialist crime on-call desk.
As a murder investigation team, you don't just deal with murders, you often get given high-risk missing persons to look at and help the local police officers. Sometimes, if you've got real concerns that somebody may have come to harm, then you take over that missing person inquiry. When it first came in, there were a few things that started to worry me, and I know we were having discussions on the team. There was something in that at very early stages, I think this doesn't feel right.
So Cyan lived in Belvedere, which is on the border of Kent and South East London. She lived there with her partner and her two sons, Zachary and Amon. Cyan had seen a deterioration in physical health over the previous 12 months or so, and she'd recently been diagnosed with motor neurone disease, and there was a very significant deterioration in her health, which led to her being unable to leave her home on her own, and she also struggled to look after her two sons without assistance. She was incredibly close to her family, who all lived in North London, and would speak to her mother on a daily basis. Cyan hadn't spoken to her mum for a couple of days, who then informed the police, and it was raised as a missing person inquiry.
You mentioned motor neurone disease. That was one of the red flags for me.
Absolutely, yeah.
She really struggled to... And to be missing with her boys on her own for 2 weeks, no contact with her family, no one had heard from her at all. Usually when an investigation begins, the media tend to get involved later. But in the case of Cyan, Zachary and Amon, the media were already involved. They were already reporting the missing person case. One of the reasons why it became so high profile in the first place was because Cyan was an actress and she'd appeared in EastEnders for a period of time.
Yeah.
And it was that got the press interested, that EastEnders actress gone missing. Now that presented us with possibilities because we could use that publicity to try and reach Cyan, but it was a double-edged sword, wasn't it?
It was a double-edged sword because there was a huge amount of media intrusion and media interest. People go missing on a daily basis in London, and the circumstances can be very, very different. And they get logged as either low, medium or high risk. Now, when the police took the first report, it was originally logged as a medium risk, because Cyan, because of the nature of her physical condition and her health and the age of her two sons, it should have been a high-risk missing person from that point. So for 2 weeks, the missing person inquiry was led by the local police, and it wasn't until the new year, when it became a news item, that the borough commander saw this. He wasn't aware of this missing person inquiry, and there were alarm bells that started to ring in his head, and felt that actually this was high risk, completely out of character, and therefore he referred it to specialist crime and the on-call homicide team, and we took full control of the missing person inquiry. So it was a case of, let's now make sure we do absolutely everything we can to resolve this situation as quickly as possible.
I was acting DI, you were DI, Graham was DCI. Our roles essentially are strategic, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're not
Yeah.
getting down and doing the detective work as such. That fell to Finn Lindstrom.
I will deploy certain detectives to a CCTV officer, a family liaison officer, an interviewing officer, house-to-house inquiries officer. You know, the list goes on. I'm Vinnie Lindstrom, retired detective sergeant. The original missing persons case would have been dealt with by the missing persons unit at the local CID. And I was personally made aware that there'd only been limited investigation into why she'd gone missing.
The police went to their home address on the 16th of December.
Right, yeah.
and spoke to her partner, Arthur Simpson Kent.
He was by profession a hairdresser, and he worked in a salon in West London.
Central London, quite a high-end salon.
He claimed that he was the hairdresser to the stars. He was in the television industry, and in fact that's how he met Sian. He met her when he was a hairdresser on the EastEnders set, and that's how they initially came in contact with each other.
Cyan and Simpson Kim weren't married, but Zachary and Amon were his
Two were his biological children.
Zachary was 7, Amon was 4.
When local police officers attended and spoke to Arthur Simpson Kent, he told them that Cyan was still processing her diagnosis of motor neurone disease, and she'd gone off to Norfolk with the boys to be with a friend.
Part of their investigation, initial investigation, was that they would have to search the house. He begrudgingly gave them that authority. They searched the house as best they could, and they found nothing untoward.
What they noticed was that it appeared that there had been decorating going on. There was tools and paintbrushes and newly painted walls. But at that stage, there was nothing in their mind that was suspicious, but came back later that day because there was some further inquiries that needed to be conducted. When they came back to the address, it was in darkness and no one was there. It appeared that Arthur Simpson Kent had now left the address as well.
I was acting DI at the time, and I knew one of the most important tasks was going to be the phones, and it shouldn't have fallen to me, but I was like, no, I'm going to do this because this is, we need to find it. Phone evidence was really pivotal in being able to build that timeline that we needed to understand.
Yeah.
So we didn't have Cyan's phone, but what we did have was the contact with the network provider, so either all the phone calls she'd made, text messages, etc. And a really important piece of information came from the family in terms of a message that had been sent to Cyan's sister. It read, "Hi, I'm taking time to myself and my children without constant opinions from family and friends. Opinions that upset me and then upset my children. Nobody knows what I'm going through, and regardless of all the comments, no one can cure me. I've had enough of appeasing everyone. We are away, and I will not be calling or speaking to anyone for a few months."
That became very suspicious because for her to send that message, well, a text message, was completely out of character for Cyan.
We became aware very early on in the investigation that Sean was suffering from motor neurone disease. In fact, a few days prior to this, she met with the doctor, the specialist doctor that was dealing with her case, and we knew that she had been informed during that meeting that she probably had only a year to live.
Although, yes, the diagnosis would have been a shock to her, she would have maintained contact with her family. They were that close that if she was to process that information, it would have been with her sister and her mother.
So that came into me as the phones officer, and looking at people's phone activity, you build up an idea of, we call it a serving cell. It's the cell tower, the phone mast, that would serve someone's home address. And this message was clearly sent from their home address.
If she had indeed sent that message, it would have meant she was in the home when the police searched it the first time. It didn't make sense.
One of the first things that we did is we go back to square one. So detectives were deployed to the house, and they would be able to conduct much more extensive searches of the house than uniform officers would be able to do. It became apparent that the walls had been recently painted over. And one of the techniques that we use is what we call a light source.
You put the room in darkness and you run an ultraviolet light through, and that will highlight anything, any sort of discrepancies or any other sort of alien or marks on the wall.
It became apparent that the kitchen area and bedrooms can only be described as an absolute bloodbath.
And as soon as that happened, and I think in everybody's minds, this is no longer a missing persons case.
At that point, it became a full-blown murder investigation.
When suspects try and clean up a crime scene, the washing away of the blood may mean that to the naked eye it can't be seen. But using special lights and luminol, that blood staining can be identified, and it can be quite impactful evidence. The blood pattern analysis indicated whatever had gone on was vital.
Yeah.
It wasn't drips of blood.
No.
It was blood spatter.
The nature of the spatter is never a good sign, as we both know. But there's always that vague, cross fingers hope that this is not what we think it is.
But with no bodies, the search went to the garden. Police dogs are trained to sniff out a wide range of items, odours, smells, etc. One of those is human remains, also known as cadaver dogs. They can search much larger distances and pick up things that just human beings wouldn't be able to do. And it was these that we used within the garden of Cyan's family. There was no fresh, as you might picture, a fresh grade or anything like that. So we used a tactic where we put sort of hollow stakes into the ground with the idea that any scent would be released.
Body starts to decompose, it starts to give off gas, doesn't it? Which is, you know, we've been in many locations and scenes and houses, so we know what that smell is like.
The human remains, dogs, were brought to the scene, and it became very quickly apparent that they're making a very, very strong indication. We've got a potential grave here.
That's not good. This isn't a good sign.
No.
And then obviously then we'll go through the process of removing the dirt, which is a slow process.
Yeah.
We had an army, essentially, of forensic scientists helping us do that scene.
And then a forensic tent was obviously delivered to the premises, and that was erected in the rear of the garden over where the dogs had made the indication that there was human remains there. Specialist police search teams dug down, and it became very apparent very quickly that this area had been disguised with branches and leaves. But once that was cleared away, we could see that the ground had recently been disturbed. The mood changes within the crime scene. They had only gone down a short distance, very short, inches, when they came across a concrete slab, like a paving stone. Then we lifted the slab.
And then we made the discovery that, one, we weren't expecting, and two, we didn't want to find. And that was that in that garden was Cyan, Zachary, and Amon.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I'm welling up now. That to me was probably one of the hardest parts of my career.
Yeah, it was incredibly difficult.
As a father, an investigator,
Sorry.
can you talk? Because
It was the worst news you could expect. It was horrible, and there'd been obviously 3 of them who murdered in horrific circumstances.
Sian was at the bottom of the grave, and then the eldest one was on top of her, and the youngest one was on top of there. One thing that struck me was that they was all in the fetal position. And it's kids that are involved. That thing sit with me for the rest of my life.
And then it was like, we're going to have to tell Cyan's family that we found all 3 of them.
And as you can imagine, as a family, that's not the news that you want to hear. They obviously were expecting it, but it's still a shock, isn't it? When you finally hear those words, that they're dead. Their lives were destroyed.
in this case, the post-mortems of Cyan, Zachary and Amon all took place at the same time. I vividly remember DS Finney Lindstrom and the 2 DCs who were coming back into our office that evening, having spent many hours at the post-mortem, and they were officers that I knew well, and I could just tell on their faces how upsetting it was for them.
Without a doubt, that's the hardest post-mortem I've ever done. We've all got kids, and I think one of the disturbing things that we discovered is that the oldest boy actually had defensive wounds to his hand, which would indicate that at the time of the death, he would have been conscious. And we can only imagine what was going through that little boy's head when that happened.
Arthur Simpson Kent. He was our prime suspect. In fact, he was the only person we were looking at. We were convinced 100% at that stage that Arthur had killed Cyan and the two boys. She was murdered by her partner and father of her two sons.
So what was important for us is that we built up a picture of the family, their lifestyle.
When we spoke to her family and her friends, they always described her as being a friendly and caring type person, and she was devoted to her children. And she was just a nice person. From all the intelligence that we gathered from friends, families and acquaintances, it became clear that he wasn't a nice person. And in fact, the relationship between him and Sean's family had virtually completely broken down.
I think he was described as being quite the charmer, a bit of a ladies' man, sort of described as a really strange character, but not, violent. There was no warning signs at that stage that there was a level of violence within him. Cyan had a diagnosis for motor neurone disease. I recall that after the diagnosis there was quite a significant decline in her physical health. So she was incredibly reliant on Simpson Kent. And it looked, at that point, it appears that he's then started to become really, really controlling towards her and the two boys.
That sense of control was really quite important when it comes to any violence within a family, isn't it? Because it tends to stem from that need to exert control. Within the phone data, I could start to build a picture of when they were most likely to have been killed. So on the night of the 13th of December, a phone call was made from Cyan to a tenant in one of the properties they look after. And we sent somebody to speak to that person, and they confirmed that it was Cyan that he had spoken to. So at that stage, we knew she was still alive.
The family then received a text message on the 16th of December, purportedly from Cyan, saying that she's going away with the boys and wants to be left alone.
It was obviously an attempt by Simpson Kent to give himself some time, make it seem like the family was still alive, whatever was his thought process. But he had sent that to the family in order to, as I say, make it seem like the family was still alive. Clearly by now they'd been murdered. And then I think it was this determination that there's no doubt who's done this. No. And we now need to find him.
Yeah. As we dig deeper into Arthur and his movements, what became apparent was that after the police had been to the address to do the follow-up inquiries, he'd literally left the address. It's as if they had spooked him. And then we had CCTV of him in Camden, didn't we, drawing money out of the cash point.
Then we tracked him to a female friend, and he got her to book him a flight.
That's right, yeah.
He got a bus from Victoria up to Glasgow. From Glasgow, he flew to Amsterdam. Yep. And then from Amsterdam, he flew to Accra in Ghana. He was now in Africa, which was going to present its own problems.
Simpson Kent was now in Africa, which presented its own problems. And it was also becoming an even bigger story for the press.
We had negatives and positives, I would say, from that media involvement. For instance, they decided to form a narrative that the police investigation, in the word of one of the newspapers, was bungled. Now, it wasn't, but what they were doing, essentially, they were conflating two things. The investigation into the missing person case and our investigation which was a murder case, which was a murder investigation. Now, the problem with that wasn't necessarily for us. We can handle that negative publicity, but it was to do with the relationship we had with Cyan's family.
think the issue you've got with the media is they don't differentiate. They look at the Met Police as like one big, huge entity. If I sort of reflect on it myself, I would have been angry with what happened at the beginning. You know, if that was my sister and the way that was dealt with, I would have been incredibly angry. I think the fact that we were very, very transparent with Cyan's family and kept them fully engaged in what we were doing helped, because they were very appreciative of all the work that was being done.
Manhunts in the UK can be really difficult. But when a suspect goes abroad, those complications are magnified. It becomes a really, really difficult task. People might not understand the restrictions placed upon police when acting in a foreign country. So officers from the UK can't just simply get on a plane, go to another country and act as they would here. We had to get international clearance, essentially, from the Ghanaian authorities.
We knew he'd flown to Ghana, at the very least. What we didn't know is whether he was still in Ghana. And that was one of the things we needed to really, really try and establish very, very quickly, because we've had previous examples where we've had murders take place, suspects has left the country, disappeared. One in particular went to India and we never saw that individual ever again, just disappeared into the ether.
In the UK, murders are categorised in terms of the type of investigation they are. And they're known as Category A, Category B, Category C. Category C murders are where the killer, the suspect's unknown. Category B are where they're not known, because this was classed as a Category A murder, because it was high profile, it was in the newspapers, etc. People higher up put pressure on departments to get things moving quicker. Eventually we managed to get the authority, and it's DCI Graham Gwynn and DC Paul Lapthorne. They go out to be the liaison for us out there.
It was very high-paced, and there was an awful lot going on. My name's Paul Lapthorne. I was a detective within homicide for over 20 years. I'm reasonably good with people. We knew that going out and liaising with the Ghanaian authorities, Interpol, the High Commission, there were going to be a lot of people that we needed to ensure that we were able to develop and maintain really fast and effective working relationships with. We started to build an intelligence package and picture about Arthur Simpson Kent.
He'd actually been born in Ghana, his mother was Ghanaian, his father was English, but he'd literally gone back to his roots.
Quite often in these cases, it's often the father kills his family and then goes on to kill himself. I think we had these discussions. Was he going there as his birthplace? That's where he was born.
Yeah.
Was he going there as almost, well, I was born there, am I going to go and...
Yeah. What was in his head? What was he thinking?
So we were met at the airport by colleagues from Interpol. We then were taken to the main police headquarters in Ghana. It's a different kind of setup in Ghana. You have to understand that their policing style is somewhat different to ours, and you also have to adjust to the speed at which they are able to work and respond to certain information.
We had no real leads as to where he was going to be. So one of the advantages we had is the press media coverage, and we use that to our advantage in terms of putting the feels out to people in Ghana.
The Met in general started getting reports from the expat residents in Ghana telling us about potential sightings of him. I recall there being one significant sighting of him on New Year's Eve where he was seen partying in a bar and described as not having a care in the world and drinking and smoking and appearing to have a great time in the new year.
And I remember at the time thinking, well, he ain't gone out there to kill himself. If anything, he's gone there to have a good time, which I couldn't get my head around.
But you're right, it was just, this is not the behaviour of someone who's gone through this horrific situation and is in complete remorse and can't live with himself. It was a complete polar opposite. Absolutely.
This was big news at that time. And what the BBC did is they sent a news crew out.
Yeah.
And what they didn't have is the red tape to go through that we did. So we switched on the news one day and there was a news reporter at the location where the New Year's Eve party was. Not only do we need to catch him quickly anyway, we have to locate him before the BBC crew does, because we will look like a bunch of idiots.
Yeah.
What we did not want is his face plastered all over the news talking about this crime. And it wouldn't have been good for the family, because they would have seen that. And I was getting phone calls from senior officers. At one stage, I was even getting calls from a representative of the Home Secretary. Pressure that was building on me was immense.
This is when we did get a bit of luck. What happened was there was a British lady, an expat, and she'd gone to Ghana many, many years ago, met this Ghanaian guy, and she married him. And they bought a small bar in this very, very small town on the coast. Now, one of the things that she did is that she kept in contact with her family back in the UK. And what they would do on a regular basis is that they would collect a number of the newspapers and they would send them out to her. She got sent a copy of The Sun. And she was looking at the front page of The Sun and looking at this image, and she realised that the guy in that image had been in her bar the night before. And she'd actually spoken to him because he ordered in an English accent. Her sister was a serving police officer in the Metropolitan Police. So she phoned her sister and she got in contact with the murder investigation team and told us this story. We were absolutely delighted.
DCI Graham Gwynn and DC Paul Lapthorne were there, and the agreement was that next morning they would all travel down in a couple of jeeps cross country to where Simpson Kent was.
It was a number of miles away, hours away from where they arrived at the capital. And so the Ghana police kindly supplied a number of Land Rovers with armed police officers with machine guns to drive down to this particular location.
Ghana is such an enormous country. It can be difficult to get to a precise location quickly.
That was a nervous wait for me. So Graham and Paul travelling down with the police from Accra, and they're getting closer and closer, and then I get another phone call, and it's from a British barmaid who works there. I've seen him. Now the villagers all know about this. They know that he's killed his family, and they've chased him out to a beach. They've chased him out there.
Yeah, I remember that.
Are they going to do something to it?
It was literally a case of praying that we got to Arthur before anyone else did.
Every time the phone rang, you know, your heart was in your mouth.
And then the phones went dead. It wasn't a good coverage area. So it was radio silence, it was quiet. I didn't know what was going on. Then we got a phone call to say that it's been caught, it's been captured. He's alive and is now in custody. And I can't begin to tell you the sense of relief I felt at that moment.
I think it was a massive relief for everyone, wasn't it, as you say? I think, I'll be honest, I was genuinely concerned that if the locals did get hold of him, and that was it for him, really, that he was done for, really.
When he was arrested, Simpson Kent was very calm. He didn't react, he didn't fight. I think he was almost resigned to the fact that he was going to be arrested.
It was a weird situation because, unlike here, they were very public over there.
Incredibly public, I don't remember, yes.
So suddenly there were photographs and videos of him in handcuffs, sat on a chair, sort of for everybody to see, and he looked quite a defeated character at that part.
I got to see Simpson Kent the following day. I wanted to make sure that he had an opportunity to speak to some legal representation. Sadly, the way that the extradition process works means that we weren't allowed to formally interview him. Otherwise, that's something that I would have dearly loved an opportunity to do.
I mean, his actions when he went to Ghana was that of someone who actually appeared to have zero remorse at all. That there was this faint hope that he actually would tell us why he did it.
If a suspect for a crime flees abroad, in order for UK police to get that person extradited back to the UK, there's certain steps they have to go through. First off, they have to get the Crown Prosecution Service to essentially authorise a charge. You have to be ready to be able to go to court and have a trial before you can get someone extradited back to the UK. So the level of evidence you need is extremely high. We've got CCTV of him leaving the car, going to a cash point, going to friends, going to Heathrow, getting the bus, getting on the planes, etc. All of that got served to the Ghanaian police. A morning or two later, all our evidence is in a national newspaper.
And there on the front page was the CCTV still of Arthur Simpson Kent drawing money out of a cash point in Camden. My biggest concern was the fact that the post-mortem report was in that bundle.
We were very careful in how we dealt with the injuries to the family because they were horrific. So I approached our press bureau and said, this cannot be right. This is our evidence.
So I remember phoning the Attorney General's office and talking it through with them. They said because of the judicial process that we were now in full flow in, that if they published anything else, they potentially could tempt a court. So I phoned up the crime editor for the paper, just said, yeah, just seen it. There'll be nothing more published. On the 26th of January 2016, an extradition hearing that took place in Accra, in Ghana, agrees to extradition of Arthur Simpson Kent for him to be returned to the United Kingdom. On the 12th of February, he landed at Heathrow Airport, was taken to the custody suite there and charged with the murder of Cyan, Zachary and Ammon. I think we was pretty confident in terms of, as you say, in terms of the evidence that we had against him, that there was going to be no issues in getting a guilty verdict on this.
In most murder cases, the defence will explore possibility of some kind of psychological defence. I think we were prepared for this.
He was psychiatrically assessed by a consultant forensic psychiatrist who actually identified that Simpson Kent did have capacity and did have insight in terms of the actions that he committed. And this was evidenced by the fact that there was planning post-murder. There was insight, there was capacity, and therefore he was deemed fit to stand trial and couldn't use the defence of psychosis.
So now Simpson Kent had two options. He went to trial, tried to persuade the jury that he was innocent, which was difficult, or plead guilty, and he elected to plead guilty.
On the 10th of June 2016, Arthur Simpson Kent entered a guilty plea of murder on 3 counts. I still don't think, in terms of the report, it really fully explained why he did what he did.
There was never a, this is what happened, and this is why I killed my family. All sorts of theories. The one for me that kind of almost makes the most sense is that if Cyan had indicated in any way to Simpson Kent that she was going to leave him, he had a controlling nature, and statistically women are in more danger at the point of separation than any other point. In our test of mad or bad, he's bad. And he's not just bad, he was evil, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the many cases that we've dealt with, I could probably count on one hand the people that I've come across who are truly evil human beings, and Arthur Simpson Kent is one of those.
In the UK, if a person is found guilty of murder, there's only one sentence they can be passed, and that is a sentence of life imprisonment. But rarely does life mean life. So then it came down to sentencing. There's a difference between what you hope for and what you expect.
On the 5th of October 2016, Arthur Simpson Kent was sentenced to full life imprisonment.
So the decision ultimately was that Simpson Kent will never be released from prison. He was given a whole life tariff. It was the best result we could have hoped for.
You know, murdering anyone is bad enough. Murdering children as well always creates more impact and is always more devastating. And so I think it was entirely proportionate to his actions.
In the UK, presently, there are around 70 prisoners that are serving a whole life sentence. Roughly around 2 a year will be given this sentence. In the UK, there's probably around between 700 and 800 murders a year. So you can see from that the small percentage that would be given one of these whole life sentences. It's not closure, but it was almost the best that we could have achieved for those people.
I had the privilege of speaking to Cyan's sister recently, and she said exactly that, the fact that they know as a family that he will never leave prison does give them some sense of justice. It's something that they can hold on to.
This case is undoubtedly the one that will stay with me forever. And the one for me that I struggle with the most is Zachary. Zachary had some defensive injuries, which would suggest that he saw the attack coming and he tried to defend himself from it. So the last thing he saw in his life was his dad brutally killing him. They died at the hands of the person they should feel the safest with, in the place they should have felt the safest. How do you feel when you reflect?
I think the thing is, when you look back over, the many jobs that you and I have been involved in, there was always a illogical rationality in terms of what the person did. You saw why or how they did what they did. We never ever got those answers, did we?
There is no doubt that this investigation was a real challenge, not only in terms of identifying where Simpson Kent was and being able to get back to the UK, but just through the heartbreaking nature of the case and the trauma, I think, that we felt as a team. So I think probably it was a case of being a sense of satisfaction for what we'd achieved for Sian's family, and a professional satisfaction that after all we'd been through, everything that was thrown at us, that we actually, at the end, were able to get that result for Sian and the boys and our family.